Billings, Montana has been keeping weather records since 1934, 92 years. And this week, for the first time in almost a century, this city could see 110 degrees. Salt Lake City is bracing to tie the hottest temperature ever recorded there, set on 5 separate days, most recently back in 2022. And in Utah and Colorado right now, wildfires are burning through more acreage than the last 5 years combined. One of them just became the first fire in Utah in 8 years to cross megafire status, more than 100 square miles. This isn't a normal summer heat wave. This is a heat dome, and it's about to make history. Let's break down exactly what's happening, why it's so dangerous, who's most at risk, and what comes next. Because believe it or not, the way this thing finally breaks could be almost as dangerous as the heat itself. So first, let's talk about what a heat dome actually is, because the term gets thrown around every summer now, and it's worth understanding why it's such a big deal. Picture a massive, slow-moving bubble of high pressure parked in the upper atmosphere. That high pressure acts like a lid on a pot. Air underneath it sinks, compresses, and heats up. And because the system barely moves, that hot air just sits there day after day, unable to escape. No storms can punch through it. No cool fronts can sweep it away. It just bakes whatever's underneath. This particular heat dome has been remarkably persistent. It first built over the central and eastern U.S. around the 4th of July, driving suffocating heat and humidity across more than 2/3 of the country and affecting over 200 million Americans. Then, as is typical with these systems, it began to migrate, pivoting west over the Southwest and Rockies in early July, intensifying over the desert Southwest, with Phoenix and Palm Springs pushing into the mid-110s and Las Vegas sitting in the low 110s. Now, as we move through the middle of July, the dome is doing something forecasters are watching closely. It's expanding and shifting north, smashing into the northern Rockies and northern plains, and that's where the truly historic numbers are showing up. Extreme heat watches and warnings currently stretch from Nevada all the way to parts of the Dakotas and northern Minnesota. That's an enormous swath of the country. And remember, an extreme heat watch means conditions are favorable for a genuinely dangerous heat event within the next day or two. This isn't a maybe bring a hat kind of warning. This is a people can die from this kind of warning. Let's get into the specific numbers because this is where things get genuinely remarkable from a meteorological standpoint. Billings, Montana is the headline. Forecasters say the city could hit its first ever high in the 100s in 92 years of record keeping. Think about that. That's not hottest day this year. That's not even hottest day this decade. That's potentially the hottest day ever measured in that city, going back to 1934. And Billings isn't alone. Almost 24 locations across eastern Montana and Wyoming are in the same boat, all flirting with their all-time record highs simultaneously. Salt Lake City is expected to push toward 107 degrees, which would tie its all-time record, a mark that's been hit 5 separate times, most recently in 2022. As of this weekend, the city had already climbed into the 106-degree range, putting it within arm's reach of the books. Pocatello, Idaho, and Sheridan, Wyoming, are both sitting near their own all-time highs as well. Part of that broader cluster of Rockies and Northern Plains cities getting caught under the most intense part of the dome. And it's not just the mountain towns. Bismarck, North Dakota hit 107 this past weekend, a number you'd more likely associate with Phoenix in August than the Northern Plains in July. Across this entire region, we're talking highs running 10 to 25 degrees above normal, and this is already the hottest stretch of the calendar year. When you stack an already hot time of year with a dome pushing temperatures that far above average, you get exactly the kind of numbers we're seeing. Numbers that don't just break daily records, they threaten all-time records that have stood for decades. Meteorologists have been blunt about how unusual this is, calling the pattern exceptionally rare for some of these locations, especially this deep into summer, when you'd expect the atmosphere to have already thrown its hottest punch. Now, why does any of this matter beyond bragging rights for the record books? Because extreme heat is statistically one of the deadliest weather phenomena in the country. Deadlier than hurricanes, deadlier than tornadoes in most years. It just doesn't make for dramatic footage the way a tornado does, so it doesn't always get the same attention. The danger here comes from a few different directions. First, there's straightforward heat illness, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke, When your body can't cool itself fast enough, especially during physical activity or prolonged sun exposure, core temperature climbs, and heat stroke can cause organ damage or death within a matter of hours if it's not caught early. Second, and this is something people underestimate, nighttime temperatures matter just as much as daytime highs. When it doesn't cool down enough overnight, your body never gets a chance to recover from the day's heat stress. That's part of what made the earlier stage of this heat dome so dangerous in the eastern half of the country, where high humidity kept overnight lows from dropping below 75 or even 80 degrees in some places, compounding the strain on people's cardiovascular systems night after night. Third, heat disproportionately affects specific groups: older adults, young children, outdoor workers, people experiencing homelessness, and anyone without reliable access to air conditioning or clean water. In rural parts of the Mountain West, that last point is especially real. Not everyone has a home cooling system built for 110-degree days because historically, they've never needed one. It's also worth noting that heat deaths are notoriously difficult to tally in real time. Officials have already confirmed dozens of heat-related deaths connected to this event across multiple states earlier this month, and public health officials routinely caution that the real toll almost always climbs higher as death certificates and medical examiner reports get finalized over the following weeks. Now let's talk about the piece of this story that's arguably even more visually dramatic than the heat itself: wildfire. Utah and Colorado are having what can only be described as a brutal fire season, and the heat dome is pouring gasoline on it, figuratively, and in some cases almost literally, given how fast some of these fires have grown. Let's start with Utah. The state has already burned through more acreage this year than the previous 5 years combined. We're talking well over 350,000 acres and climbing, driven largely by two fires that have both reached what officials call mega fire status, more than 100 square miles each. The Cottonwood Fire, burning in the Fish Lake Nat Ional Forest, has scorched nearly 100,000 acres and has been described as one of the most destructive fires in Utah's history, destroying structures and forcing the closure of the Eagle Poe in ski resort. The Babylon Fire, near Monticello and the Bears Ears National Monument area, has grown even larger, over 100,000 acres, and at various points has been the largest actively burning wildfire in the entire United States. It's forced closures in Canyonlands National Park's Needles District and put nearby communities on heightened evacuation alert. To put Utah's fire year in perspective, the state's snowpack last winter was the lowest since 1930. Nearly the entire American West is currently in drought, and the majority of that is classified as severe. When you combine essentially no snowpack, months of dry heat, and now a heat dome squeezing out whatever moisture is left in the vegetation, you get exactly this kind of explosive fire behavior. In Colorado, the situation has been just as severe. The Aspen Acres fire, which ignited in Pueblo and Custer counties, exploded with startling speed, growing from a spark to tens of thousands of acres within days and ultimately becoming one of the largest wildfires in Colorado's recorded history. It's destroyed well over 100 homes and structures, with entire communities like Rye, Beulah, and Wetmore among the hardest hit. For residents who've lost homes, the damage isn't just structural, it's decades of memories and belongings gone in hours. Colorado is also dealing with the Ferris Fire, which merged with the Doe Canyon Fire and the Gold Mountain Fire near Ouray. Combined with the fires along the Utah border, more than 200,000 acres have burned across the two states from this cluster of fires alone. And this fire season has already taken a heartbreaking human toll. 3 firefighters were killed battling the Snyder Fire along the Utah-Colorado line after their crew was overtaken by a fast-moving blaze with no viable escape route. Colorado's governor ordered flags flown at half-staff across the state in their honor. It's a sober reminder that behind every containment percentage on a map, there are real people putting themselves in harm's way. Here's where the heat dome and the wildfires start feeding into each other in a genuinely nasty feedback loop. Remember that lid we talked about earlier? It doesn't just trap heat, it traps smoke and pollutants too. Normally, smoke from a wildfire can rise and disperse into the upper atmosphere, spreading out and thinning as it goes. But under a heat dome, that atmospheric lid keeps everything pinned close to the surface. Smoke from fires in Colorado and Utah has been producing hazy skies and elevated air quality alerts well beyond the immediate fire zones, reaching cities like Denver, which has already been dealing with its own potentially historic stretch of extreme heat. That combination, Extreme heat plus trapped wildfire smoke is particularly dangerous for anyone with asthma, COPD, or heart conditions, and it adds yet another layer of risk on top of the heat illness concerns we covered earlier. If you're in one of these affected areas, this is genuinely a good stretch to check your local air quality index before heading outside, not just the temperature. So how does this finally break? This is the part of the story people don't always see coming. As the heat dome shifts north and weakens over the southwest, it opens the door for the North American monsoon to return in earnest. That's actually good news in one sense. Monsoon moisture streaming up from Mexico brings much-needed rain to a bone-dry region and can help temper the most extreme heat and even assist firefighting efforts. And this is a big but. That same monsoon moisture arriving on top of scorched, denuded landscapes from all these recent fires creates a serious flash flood and debris flow risk. When wildfire burns through an area, it doesn't just remove vegetation. It can literally change the soil chemistry, creating a waxy, water-repellent layer just below the surface. That means rain that would normally soak into the ground instead runs straight off fast, carrying ash, rock, and debris with it. This is exactly the kind of terrain we're now looking at across huge portions of Utah and Colorado. So the same fires we've spent the last several minutes discussing are now setting up the next hazard in the pipeline. Forecasters expect the heat to possibly re-intensify across the Central Plains and Mountain West through the middle of the month before a fuller monsoonal surge finally breaks the pattern in the back half of July. If you're traveling through canyon country near burn scars or in any low-lying terrain in this region over the coming weeks, flash flooding is absolutely something to have on your radar, even on a day that doesn't look stormy where you are, because these floods can be triggered by rain falling miles away. If you've got a trip planned to any of the West's iconic national parks this summer, this heat dome is directly relevant to you. Parks including Glacier, Yellowstone, Grand Teton, Badlands, Theodore Roosevelt, and Utah's Mighty Five, Zion, Bryce Canyon, Capitol Reef, Canyonlands, and Arches are all sitting inside or near the hottest part of this pattern. Some park authorities may shorten hours, restrict trail access during peak afternoon heat, or close areas entirely depending on fire activity and burn scar conditions. Here's the practical checklist. Check current park alerts and closures before you go. Conditions are changing fast, sometimes day to day. Hike early. If you're doing anything strenuous outdoors, aim to be finishing up by mid-morning, not starting. Hydrate aggressively, more than you think you need, and don't rely on thirst alone as your guide. Avoid peak afternoon heat for any exertion. That's roughly midday through late afternoon in most of these areas right now. Watch the sky, not just the forecast, if you're anywhere near a recent burn scar. Flash floods can develop with little warning. So to wrap it up, we've got a heat dome that's already made history in the East, is currently threatening decades, and in some cases nearly a century, of temperature records across the Rockies and Northern Plains, feeding an already brutal wildfire season in Utah and Colorado, and setting the stage for a risky transition into monsoon season with real flash flood danger on the horizon. If this kind of pattern feels like it's becoming the new normal for Western summers, you're not imagining it. We'll keep tracking this system as it evolves. So if you want the next update as soon as conditions change, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay cool, stay hydrated, and stay safe out there. I'll see you in the next one.